On the morning of October 13, 1841, 23 witnesses watched what Hartford's high society would soon call the most shocking wedding in Connecticut history. Within moments of sipping the ceremonial wine, 19-year-old Bridget O'Sullivan slumped at the altar of Trinity Episcopal Church. Her gown pooled around her as she convulsed, white foam at her lips. Her final words, heard clearly from the front pew, were a single, desperate whisper. "The wine. It burns." What authorities uncovered 3 days later revealed a cold, calculated murder so chilling the Hartford Courant refused to print the full details for fear of public outrage. The killer had sat among the wedding guests, watching every tortured minute with the composure of someone who had planned this moment down to the last breath. Before we continue with the tragedy of the O'Sullivans and the woman who orchestrated it, Elellanena Peton, take a moment to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps bring forgotten American mysteries back into the light. The truth behind that autumn morning revealed a tangled web of social contempt, financial desperation, and a mother's obsession, forces that would permanently reshape Hartford's elite. In 1841, Hartford balanced on the edge between old New England traditions and the surge of industrial change. Steamboats moved goods up and down the Connecticut River. Factories rose along the banks, their chimneys challenging church steeples for the skyline. The city now counted nearly 13,000 people, and waves of Irish immigrants arrived to work the mills and railroads, willing to labor from dawn to dusk for wages that unsettled established workers. Among Hartford's established families, none were more respected than the Petons. Elellanena Peton, 48, widowed 6 years, reigned from her 3-story federal mansion on Prospect Street. Its manicured gardens and iron fence signaled everything old Connecticut valued: stability, pedigree, unquestioned social rank. But Elellanena had not been born to this life. The daughter of a modestly prosperous Hartford merchant, she had married above her station in 1815 when she wed Jonathan Peton, heir to a shipping fortune that grew through the War of 1812. Jonathan chose Elellanena not for pedigree but for beauty and a fierce intelligence, an alliance that scandalized a few but ultimately cemented Peton power as Jonathan expanded into insurance and manufacturing. Their only child, William, arrived in 1817 after 3 miscarriages that had convinced Elellanena he was a miracle. She poured everything into his upbringing, making sure he had the finest education. William studied law and literature at Yale and returned to Hartford in 1839 to join the family business. Tall, scholarly, dark-haired like his father, with his mother's penetrating grey eyes. He was, by every measure, one of Hartford's most eligible bachelors. When Jonathan died suddenly in 1835, Elellanena assumed control of an estate worth roughly $40,000. A fortune that made her one of Connecticut's wealthiest women. She managed money with an iron fist, guarding both wealth and reputation carefully. The Peton name opened doors across New England, and Elellanena intended it to stay that way. At the same time, Hartford's demographics were shifting fast. The 1830s had brought accelerated Irish migration, driven by poverty and failing crops, pushing newcomers into cramped tenements near the railroad depot, in quarters with terrible sanitation and meager pay. Their willingness to work for low wages drove costs down for factory owners and created simmering resentment among native-born laborers. Elellanena heard these complaints at Ladies' Aid Society meetings, stories of Irish servants accused of theft, of children squabbling with proper American youngsters, of families of 10 squeezed into rooms meant for 4. In polite conversation Hartford's established, families began whispering about the Irish problem, wondering if these Catholic newcomers could ever truly become Americans. It was into this tense climate that the O'Sullivans arrived. In late 1839, 38-year-old Patrick O'Sullivan, a widower, brought his 4 children to Hartford seeking work. His eldest daughter Bridget was 17, striking, red hair and emerald eyes that seemed to catch whatever light broke through Hartford's grey winters. Bridget found steady work as a seamstress in a respectable dress shop on State Street. Her skill with fine fabrics and the absence of a heavy brogue made her popular with customers. Patrick landed a supervisor post at Colt's Firearms Works, his Dublin mill experience translating well to the factory floor. The wages allowed the family to rent a modest but tidy house on Front Street, closer to the city centre than most Irish families could afford. Bridget's life changed at a public lecture by a visiting Harvard professor on American literature. Working people were given seats in the back. Bridget attended at her employer's encouragement. Mrs. Catherine Hendris urged her staff to pursue culture and education. William Peton noticed her immediately. She sat in the back, listening with an intensity that pulled him in. When the floor opened for questions, Bridget asked about the influence of Irish poetry on American writers, an articulate, thoughtful question that turned heads. After the lecture, William approached her. "That was an excellent question," he said, tipping his hat. "I'm William Peton." Bridget answered calmly. "Bridget O'Sullivan." "Mr. Peton, pleased to meet you." And they walked together toward State Street, trading thoughts on books and ideas. He learned she had read widely despite limited schooling: Shakespeare, contemporary American writers, whatever she could borrow from a kindly Dublin priest or Hartford's lending libraries. He invited her to the next lecture on American history. She accepted with a shy, bright smile. Their courtship unfolded quietly. Walks by the Connecticut, shared lectures, an easy companionship that bridged class lines. William knew the risks of courting a working-class Irish seamstress, but he found her intelligence and grace irresistible. Elellanena remained unaware for nearly 6 months. William kept his private life discreet. She assumed his absences were business or social obligations befitting a young man of his class. The secret came out on a humid July afternoon in 1840. Elellanena decided to surprise William at his office in the Peton building on State Street, carrying cold lemonade and news of an invitation to the governor's summer reception. As she climbed the stairs to the second floor, voices came through the closed door. 2 voices, close enough to make her pause. From behind the door, Eleanor heard William's familiar baritone and a woman's voice she didn't recognize. "My mother will never accept this," William was saying. "But I don't care about her approval anymore, Bridget. I love you, and that's all that matters." Eleanor froze on the landing. Her hand clamped so tightly around the lemonade pitcher, her knuckles blanched white. "Your family's position in society," the woman replied, her words carrying the faintest Irish accent, an accent that sent a chill straight through Eleanor's veins. "I don't want to be the reason you quarrel with her. She's given everything for you." "You don't understand," William insisted. "She's dictated every choice since Father died, who I spend time with, where I live, even who I should marry. I'm 23, and I've never once made a decision that was truly mine. That ends now." Eleanor pressed against the wall, her pulse hammering so loudly she feared they might hear it through the wood. "When will you tell her about us?" Bridget asked. "Soon," William promised. "Very soon. I want you to meet her properly, as the woman I intend to marry. She'll see what I see, your intelligence, your kindness, your strength. She'll have to accept it." The scrape of a chair across the floor jolted Eleanor from her trance. She fled down the stairs, abandoning the pitcher on the landing, and climbed into her carriage in a haze of dread that curdled into fury. By the time she reached Prospect Street, the truth scorched in her mind. An Irish girl. Her William, the heir to the Peton fortune, was going to marry an Irish immigrant. Everything Eleanor had built, everything she had clawed her way toward, would be destroyed by this nobody. This girl had snared her son with calculated charm, and he was too blind to see it. That evening, William returned home cheerful, humming to himself as he carved the roast, a satisfied smile dancing on his lips. Eleanor wanted to demand the truth, but years of maneuvering had taught her patience. She needed knowledge before action. "You're in excellent spirits tonight, William," she said lightly. "Am I? Well, I suppose I am. I've been thinking of changes. Important changes." "Oh, what kind?" William set down his fork and looked her squarely in the eyes. "Mother, I've met someone, a woman of remarkable character and intelligence. I believe she may be the one I wish to marry." Eleanor's hand trembled on her glass. "How wonderful, dear. Anyone I know?" "No," William said carefully. "But I want you to meet her. Her name is Bridget O'Sullivan. Her family came from Ireland 2 years ago. The glass slipped from Eleanor's fingers, shattering against the plate. She forced a brittle smile. How clumsy of me. You said O'Sullivan? She asked coolly. Yes, her father works at Colt's factory. She's employed at Mrs. Hendriss's dress shop. Mother, I know what you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything. Eleanor cut him off smoothly. I'm only surprised. You've never spoken of her before. I wanted to be sure of my feelings, and now I am. I love her, Mother. I intend to ask for her hand. Eleanor spent that night pacing the Persian carpet of her sitting room until she wore a path in the weave. William loved this Irish girl. He meant to marry her. The implications struck like physical blows. Marriage to an Irish immigrant would wreck his standing. Hartford's best families would close their doors. Their children would bear the mark of mixed heritage, unwelcome both among the elite and among the Irish poor. Worse, as William's wife, Bridget, would have legal claim to the Peton fortune. She might steer his wealth to Irish causes, Catholic churches, or reckless schemes. Eleanor had clawed her way from merchant-class origins to the pinnacle of Hartford society. She would not allow a Catholic seamstress to drag it all into the gutter. Over the following weeks, Eleanor investigated. Patrick O'Sullivan was a competent worker, but rumoured to flirt with labour unrest. Bridget was respected at the dress shop, but society matrons whispered about her presumptions. And the O'Sullivans, Eleanor learned, attended Mass at Holy Trinity, an institution Protestant Hartford eyed with suspicion. The idea of her grandchildren kneeling to Rome filled her with horror. Meanwhile, William paraded Bridget with pride. He brought her to lectures, public outings, even social gatherings. Hartford reacted with polite surprise that quickly gave way to gossip. The scandal grew with each appearance. The breaking point came over breakfast in early September. William set down his cup and said calmly, I've spoken with Mr. O'Sullivan. He's given permission for me to propose. I plan to ask Bridget tonight. Eleanor placed her coffee cup down with icy care. William, I must ask you to reconsider. Marriage isn't just about feelings. It's about shared values, compatible backgrounds, family legacies. She may be pleasant, but she comes from a world entirely different than ours. What seems charming now will become conflict later. Her background doesn't matter to me. It should matter. It will matter to your children, to your business, to everyone we know. William shoved back his chair, his jaw tight. I'm disappointed in you. I expected better from someone who once married for love herself. Your father and I came from similar families. Eleanor snapped. This is different. These people are not like us. They have different loyalties, different priorities. This girl will change you, and not for the better. This conversation is over, William said coldly. I'm going to propose, with or without your blessing. When he left, Eleanor sat alone at the dining table, staring at her untouched breakfast. The decision was made. William would marry the Irish girl, and when he did, Eleanor's grip on the Peton legacy would shatter. Unless she acted. On September 15, 1840, the Hartford Courant announced the engagement of William Peton to Bridget O'Sullivan. The short notice in the society column stirred more conversation than any other item that season. In tea parlours and gentlemen's clubs across the city, people debated whether William had lost his senses or simply fallen prey to Irish seduction. Eleanor maintained a mask of gracious acceptance in public, while privately she seethed. At social gatherings, well-meaning friends offered muted congratulations laced with sympathetic undertones. How progressive of William, they'd say, their smiles hiding scandalized whispers. The worst came at a ladies' aid meeting when Mrs. Harrison Fitzgerald, whose own Irish roots Hartford conveniently forgot, made a pointed remark about maintaining proper standards in marriage. We must be charitable to immigrants, she said, casting a meaning-filled glance at Eleanor. But there are boundaries that should not be crossed. Eleanor smiled tightly and changed the subject, but the humiliation burned like acid. She felt patronized by women who once deferred to her. The Peton name, once a key to every doorway in Connecticut, had become fodder for gossip. Eleanor began to study Bridget O'Sullivan with the cold precision of a strategist assessing an adversary. She attended every public appearance the couple made, noting how Bridget moved, how she spoke, how she charmed Hartford's elite. What she saw alarmed her further. This was no awkward peasant. Bridget carried an effortless elegance that couldn't be taught, an intelligence that shone in conversation, and a warmth that drew people in. Even Eleanor's fiercest social critics admitted the girl's remarkable poise. More dangerous than Bridget's polish was William's devotion. He looked at her with an adoration Eleanor had never seen for him before. He matched his stride to hers, listened to her with full attention, and defended her against slighted remarks as if she were family. The protectiveness unnerved Eleanor. It mirrored the way Jonathan had once defended her, and now it stood between her and the future she had planned. The wedding was set for October 13th. William wanted an intimate ceremony. Bridget insisted on inviting both families and their close friends. "I want everyone we love to witness our vows," she told him. "I don't want anyone to think we're ashamed." Eleanor realized a public wedding would cement her humiliation. Every prominent household in Hartford would attend, then dissect the union for months. Peton prestige forever tied to scandal. As September turned to October, Eleanor's desperation grew. She considered every option: feign illness to delay the ceremony, bribe Bridget O'Sullivan to withdraw consent, even threaten to disinherit William. Each carried unacceptable risk. William might ignore her illness, a bribe could backfire if exposed, and disinheritance would sever her influence for good. She needed a solution that would remove the problem quietly and irrevocably. Her answer arrived during a sleepless night while she reviewed her late husband's papers. Among Jonathan's correspondence was a letter to a New York associate who supplied rare industrial chemicals. The file discussed compounds used in textile processes, including arsenic oxide. Jonathan had examined its commercial uses, but rejected the investment on safety grounds. The letter described the compound in blunt terms: a white, crystalline powder, soluble in liquids, virtually tasteless when mixed with strong flavors, and most crucially, capable of producing rapid symptoms that could mimic ordinary ailments. Detection, the letter noted, required specialized chemical analysis, rarely performed in sudden death inquiries. Eleanor read the passage 3 times. The logic was terrible and clinical, but clear. A sudden illness at the altar, shocking but plausible, could look like natural tragedy. A bride collapsing mid-ceremony might be mourned rather than investigated. Arsenic oxide, obtained through legitimate business channels, could be administered subtly in the wine or a moist cake slice. Her late husband's contacts gave her cover. No one would suspect premeditation. On October 8th, 5 days before the wedding, Eleanor traveled to New York. Dressed in her most respectable traveling coat and armed with Jonathan's correspondence, she visited Hartwell Chemical Supply. Mr. Hartwell, a thin, nervous man with wire-rimmed spectacles, remembered Jonathan and welcomed her questions. Eleanor presented the letters and spoke convincingly about continuing her husband's inquiry into textile treatments. She asked practically for a small sample for testing. Hartwell disappeared into the storeroom and returned with a small glass vial, 2 ounces of a white crystalline powder. "This should be enough for preliminary tests," he cautioned. "Observe safety precautions. This compound is highly toxic if ingested or inhaled." Eleanor paid cash, tucked the vial into her reticule and felt no remorse, only a grim sense of resolution. On the train back to Hartford, she held the purse close, aware of the lethal object at her side and comforted by the knowledge that she had acted decisively. The remaining days blurred into wedding preparations. Bridget, unaware of the plot, had even invited Eleanor to help plan the reception as an olive branch. "I want you to feel this is your celebration too, Mrs. Peton," she had said sincerely while reviewing menus. The gesture both touched and enraged Eleanor. Bridget's goodwill made the decision colder. Eleanor spent those final nights calculating dosage like an apothecary. Too little might merely sicken the bride and leave room for suspicion. Too much could produce gruesome symptoms that would invite autopsy. She needed a quantity that caused rapid collapse, without obvious textbook signs of foul play. something that would read, in the public record, as a tragic but natural catastrophe. Drawing from Jonathan's old correspondence and medical texts borrowed from Hartford's library, Eleanor calculated that just half a teaspoon of arsenic oxide, dissolved in wine, would be enough. The effects would begin within minutes: convulsions, burning sensations, collapse, all resembling the sudden strain of excitement or heart failure. On the morning of October 13th, Eleanor rose before dawn with a chilling clarity of purpose she hadn't felt in months. Every step of her plan had been rehearsed dozens of times in her mind. She knew precisely how and when to act. The knowledge gave her grim determination. The ceremony was set for 11 o'clock at Trinity Episcopal Church, with the reception to follow at the Peton mansion. Eleanor had volunteered to oversee refreshments, which granted her full access to the ceremonial wine for the blessing. She dressed in her finest dark blue silk gown and fastened around her neck the pearl necklace Jonathan had gifted her on their own wedding day. Her reflection showed a woman of composure and respectability, the very picture of a Hartford matron. No one would suspect the murderous resolve beneath her calm exterior. The arsenic oxide rested in a silk sachet sewn into the pocket of her gown. The night before, she had measured the powder carefully and practiced the motion of releasing it until her movements appeared entirely natural. A small flick of the hand, a subtle stir of the chalice, and the deed would be done. At 9 a.m., Eleanor arrived at Trinity. The Gothic Revival Church, with its spire piercing the sky and stained glass glowing faintly in the autumn light, had been decorated with ribbons of gold and burgundy. Though modest by elite standards, the simple arrangements carried an elegance even Eleanor had to admit was effective. Father Matthews, the elderly priest, greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Peton, how lovely. I hear you've been so helpful in arranging today's celebration." "It's my honor, Father," she replied smoothly, her smile betraying nothing. "Such a joyous day for our family." She moved briskly through the building, checking flowers, arranging chairs, but her gaze lingered on the communion table where the heavy silver chalice, her gift to the couple, stood ready. In the vestry, bottles of French wine awaited the moment of blessing. Eleanor herself had requested their finest vintage, explaining to the priest she wanted William and Bridget to begin their union with only the best. By 10:30, guests began to arrive. Eleanor stationed herself at the entrance, every bit the gracious hostess. She watched Bridget O'Sullivan usher his younger children to their seats, his pride unmasked in the polished clothes he had clearly purchased at great expense. The sight made Eleanor's stomach tighten with contempt. Soon, Hartford's finest families arrived in their carriages, their faces composed, yet their eyes betraying subtle judgment at the mingling of classes. Just as Eleanor had predicted, their polite nods to the Irish families were followed by careful avoidance. At 10:45, William entered with his best man, Charles Wittmann. Eleanor felt an unexpected stab of love for her son as she watched him nervously adjust his cravat, speaking softly with Father Matthews. Handsome, happy, utterly unaware, William was about to be saved from the gravest mistake of his life. At the stroke of 11, the church bells tolled. Bridget appeared at the rear of the nave. For an instant, Eleanor's breath caught. The girl was undeniably radiant. Her auburn hair was styled with graceful simplicity. Her handmade gown fitted perfectly, and the bouquet of roses in her hand seemed to glow against the light streaming through stained glass. Guests smiled involuntarily at the sight. Even the most rigid matrons appeared softened by Bridget's joy. The service began in solemn tradition. Father Matthew spoke of marriage's sacred bond, of respect, of devotion. William and Bridget exchanged vows with voices steady, their eyes locked in unbroken devotion. From the front pew, Eleanor's hand closed on the hidden sachet. Soon, she reminded herself, soon this humiliation would end. At last, Father Matthews turned to the communion table. It was Eleanor's moment. Rising gracefully, she approached. "Allow me to assist with the preparation, Father," she murmured. Grateful, the priest nodded and faced the congregation, speaking of the sacred symbolism of wine. As he spoke, Eleanor's hand slipped into her pocket. With movements perfected by rehearsal, she tipped the white powder into the chalice, then stirred delicately with a silver spoon. The crystals dissolved instantly into the deep red wine. No trace remained. "William and Bridget," Father Matthews declared, "come forward and share the wine of commitment, symbol of the vows you have spoken today." Eleanor returned to her seat, pulse hammering in her ears. William approached first, sipped lightly and handed the chalice to his bride. Bridget smiled at him, raised the cup to her lips and drank deeply. She set it down without hesitation, her face glowing with joy. It was done. The fatal dose had entered her body. The congregation applauded warmly as the newlyweds processed down the aisle. Eleanor joined the receiving line, her expressions polite, her responses mechanical. Every fiber of her attention was fixed on Bridget. Any moment now, the first signs, pallor, shallow breaths, trembling hands, would begin. But the minutes passed, and Bridget only laughed, cheeks flushed, chatting animatedly with well-wishers. Eleanor's smile remained fixed, but beneath it grew a gnawing anxiety. According to her research, the poison should already be working. Why then did Bridget still appear untouched, radiant, alive, and seemingly unharmed? Bridget's breathing remained steady. Her cheeks glowed, her posture was strong. 25 minutes after swallowing the poisoned wine, she still moved among the guests with undiminished energy. For the first time, Eleanor felt panic crawl into her chest. Had she miscalculated the dosage? Was the compound defective? Or worse, was this Irish girl blessed with a constitution strong enough to resist death itself? The wedding party shifted toward the Peton mansion for the breakfast reception. Eleanor walked arm in arm with Father Matthews, smiling politely as they exchanged pleasantries, though inside she seethed. Her carefully constructed plan seemed to be failing, and she had no strategy for recovery. Inside the mansion, the celebration was grand. Autumn flowers adorned the drawing room, the dining tables gleamed with Eleanor's finest china and crystal, and the air smelled of oysters, roast fowl, and champagne. Eleanor floated through the room with the grace of a hostess, but beneath her practiced smile lay gnawing desperation. 45 minutes since the chalice, and still Bridget glowed with vitality. She accepted handshakes, curtsied, and moved among Hartford's elite with the poise of a woman born to such company. "Mrs. Peton," drawled Mrs. Harrison Fitzgerald, raising her glass of champagne. The ceremony was exquisite. "And your new daughter-in-law, so much more refined than one might expect from her background." Eleanor's smile tightened. "Yes, Bridget is lovely. We're very pleased with William's choice." The words turned to ash in her mouth. If the poison failed, she would be forced to accept this Irish intruder into the Peton legacy forever. If you think this wedding is unsettling already, share this story with a friend who loves dark history. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because what comes next is far more disturbing. As the reception carried on, Eleanor's eyes never left Bridget. The girl laughed brightly, toasted with champagne, and even ate delicate portions of food without hesitation. 1 hour passed. No symptoms, no collapse, nothing. Eleanor excused herself, slipping into her private study. There, behind closed doors, fury consumed her. She had risked everything, and the plan was unraveling. Had she failed entirely? She paced the length of the Persian carpet, wringing her hands, when the sound of commotion reached her ears. Voices rising, a cry for Dr. Harrison. Eleanor's heart leapt, hope reborn. She rushed back into the drawing room, her face painted with maternal concern. There before her, Bridget sat pale and trembling in Eleanor's prized wingback chair. William knelt beside her, frantic, clutching her hands. "I don't understand," Bridget whispered weakly. "I felt fine, and then suddenly, what are her symptoms?" Dr. Harrison demanded, already kneeling to examine her. "Stomach pain, nausea, trouble breathing," William answered quickly. "She says her throat is burning." Dr. Harrison, gray-haired and stern, placed 2 fingers on her wrist, studying her pulse with grim intensity. He asked precise questions about the onset of symptoms, his manner calm but urgent. Eleanor leaned close, her mask flawless. "Dr. Harrison, is there nothing we can do? Perhaps move her upstairs to rest?" "No," the physician snapped. "Not yet. Mrs. Peton, send for my medical bag immediately." And have your cook prepare strong salt water. She must drink as much as possible." Eleanor dispatched the servants, hiding the satisfaction blooming in her chest. The poison was working, slower than expected, but working nonetheless. Bridget's breath came shallow now, perspiration gleamed on her brow and her hands shook against the chair. Then Bridget looked up, straight into Eleanor's eyes. Her own glistened with unnatural brightness as she whispered, "The wine. It burns. The wine at the church." It tasted strange. Eleanor's blood froze. Had the girl somehow recognized the poison, or was this merely delirium brought on by the toxin? "My dear," Eleanor said softly, "the wine was from our finest vintage. Surely it's just the excitement." But Dr. Harrison had gone still. His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Peton," he said sharply, "what wine did you serve during the ceremony?" "A French vintage," Eleanor replied evenly. "The same we've poured for years at family celebrations." "Surely you don't think—" "I think," Harrison cut her off, "we may be dealing with more than nerves. More than food illness. This looks like arsenical poisoning." The words struck the drawing room like thunder. Women gasped, men surged forward to listen. William's face drained white. "Poison," he cried. "That's impossible!" "She ate nothing that wasn't served to everyone else." "Not everyone else," Harrison corrected darkly. "Only you and your bride drank from that chalice. And you, Mr. Peton, show no symptoms at all." Eleanor felt the walls close in. The doctor was stripping away every other explanation, pointing to the single damning act, the wine at the altar. Panic clawed at her throat. She forced herself to speak calmly, to deflect suspicion. "Perhaps the poison came from elsewhere," she suggested, desperation just barely hidden beneath her poise. "These old houses, they often hide poisons of their own," Eleanor murmured, trying to steady her voice. "Lead pipes, contaminated wells. Who's to say it wasn't that?" But Dr. Harrison wasn't buying it. His sharp eyes lingered on her, studying her face with a surgeon's precision. Eleanor could feel his suspicion pressing against her carefully constructed mask, peeling it away layer by layer. Meanwhile, Bridget slipped further toward the abyss. Her breaths came in shallow rasps, her eyelids heavy, her skin drained of color. When she tried to form words, only broken whispers escaped her lips. "We need to move her now," Dr. Harrison snapped. "Mr. Peton, can your carriage carry a stretcher? If there's any chance to save her, time is critical." That word "save" struck Eleanor like a knife. She had been certain the arsenic would seal Bridget's fate, swift and irreversible. The idea that medicine could intervene, that the bride might survive long enough to name her, attack her, filled Eleanor with a dread more paralyzing than death itself. The carriage ride to Main Street was silent but suffocating. Bridget drifted in and out of consciousness, her gasps weakening with every jolt of the wheels. By the time they reached Dr. Harrison's brick-fronted practice, her body was limp, her pulse fading. Inside, the doctor wasted no time. Salt water forced down her throat. Vomiting, milk and egg whites mixed in frantic desperation. William clutched her hand, whispering reassurances, while Eleanor hovered nearby, her face painted with false worry, her soul secretly praying for Bridget's last breath. "Mr. Peton," Harrison said between treatments, "I've already sent my assistant back to Trinity. The chalice and the opened wine bottle will tell us the truth." Eleanor's heart seized. That chalice still held traces of her crime. White crystals invisible to the eye, but undeniable to chemical tests. If the doctor found it, suspicion would harden into certainty. 20 minutes later, the assistant returned with the silver cup and the bottle. Dr. Harrison performed his tests with grim determination. When the liquid hissed and discolored beneath his reagents, his expression darkened. "As I feared," he announced, voice heavy with authority. "This wine was laced with arsenic. This was no accident. This was deliberate." The words ripped through the room like thunder. William's face went pale. "Murder? But Bridget has no enemies." Harrison's gaze swept the chamber slowly, deliberately, until it came to rest on Eleanor. She felt her blood freeze. His eyes said what his lips did not. He knew. Only a handful of people had access to that chalice. The doctor continued, "And arsenic oxide is not a substance one stumbles across. This was planned. This was prepared." Eleanor's breath came sharp and shallow. Her excuses crumbled in her throat. Then a sound, soft, fragile, cut through the tension. "William," Bridget's voice, weak but alive. She stirred on the examination table, her eyelids fluttering open. Her gaze found her husband's face, confused, trembling. "What happened? Where am I?" "You're safe now, my love," William whispered, pressing her hand to his lips. "You've been very ill, but Dr. Harrison, he's saving you." Bridget's eyes roamed the room until they locked on Eleanor. The silence between them felt like an iron chain. A memory flickered in the bride's mind, then sharpened into a blade. "The wine," she whispered hoarsely. "Something was wrong with the wine. I remember seeing someone at the chalice, someone who shouldn't have been there." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Who did you see, child?" Dr. Harrison asked, gently leaning in. Bridget's lips trembled, but her eyes never left Eleanor's face. "It was her," she breathed. "Mrs. Peton. I saw her stir something into the wine." The accusation struck like an explosion. Gasps filled the room. William's jaw dropped, his voice breaking. "Mother, tell me this isn't true." Eleanor felt her carefully built world collapse, stone by stone. The mask of innocence shattered. A strange relief settled over her as the truth spilled out. "She would have destroyed everything," Eleanor hissed. "Your position, our fortune, the Peton name, all of it, lost to an Irish girl who charmed you into betraying your blood." William recoiled as if burned. "You tried to kill the woman I love, because she was Irish." "I tried to save you," Eleanor spat, her eyes blazing. "Do you not see? That girl would drag us into the gutter of Catholic superstition and immigrant filth. Your children would be mongrels, outcasts with no place in decent society. Better the Peton line end entirely than be polluted by foreign blood." Her words hung in the air, venomous, unholy, and the horror of what she had become was laid bare for all to see. Dr. Harrison had listened with the steady calm of a man accustomed to life-and-death moments, but now his tone hardened. "Mrs. Peton, I have no choice. I must inform the constabulary. You have admitted to attempted murder, and you did so in front of witnesses." Eleanor gave a bitter laugh, her composure cracking into venom. "You think they'll prosecute me? A respected Hartford matron? Half the city council whispers the same fears I do about the Irish plague." "Perhaps," Harrison replied coldly, "but arsenic is no opinion. It is a crime, and the law, Mrs. Peton, applies even to the wealthy widows who believe their prejudice makes them righteous." The trial began November 20th, 1841. Hartford Superior Court overflowed with journalists from Boston, New York and beyond. Society had never seen anything like it. A woman of Elellanena Peton standing, charged with poisoning her son's Irish bride at the altar. Judge Samuel Huntington, himself steeped in Hartford's old elite, presided with iron precision. Personal ties meant nothing now. The evidence was overwhelming. Harrison's testimony about the arsenic, the chemical proof in the chalice, Bridget's own words, and Eleanor's confession. The prosecutor painted her as cold and calculating. She placed vanity above life, reputation above love, prejudice above mercy. Her defense tried to plead madness, a mother driven to hysteria by her son's choices. But the deliberate purchase of arsenic, the carefully timed poisoning, the icy preparation, it all screamed premeditation. Bridget's testimony crushed the defense entirely. The young bride, pale but unbroken, stood before the jury and spoke with a grace that silenced the room. "I do not hate Mrs. Peton," she said. "I believe she loved her son, but she tried to end my life because of where I was born, and that I cannot forgive." Then William took the stand. His voice cracked as he spoke of the two women he loved most, one who gave him life and one who nearly lost hers because of it. "My mother raised me on honor," he said. "Now that honor demands I speak the truth, no matter how it damns her." The jury was gone less than 2 hours. Guilty, attempted murder. 15 years in Connecticut State Prison. Eleanor's composure never faltered as the sentence was read, but she avoided her son's eyes. She never looked at Bridget. The scandal consumed Hartford. The Peton name, once a pillar of New England society, became ash in polite circles. William and Bridget fled to Boston, where he built a law career, and she raised 3 children who grew into pillars of Massachusetts society. Bridget devoted herself to charity, helping Irish immigrants bridge the very gap Eleanor had once tried to close with poison. Eleanor served 12 years. Released in 1853, she returned to Hartford stripped of fortune, status and family. She lived out her final years in a boarding house, unvisited, unloved, dying in 1858, 5 years before meeting the grandchildren she had once sworn to prevent. The silver chalice that had carried the poison was melted down, its metal turned into a fund for Irish newcomers. Father Matthews, scarred by the desecration of his church, changed wedding rites forever. No longer would a single person touch the chalice alone. The poisoned chalice case, as newspapers called it, became a legend and a warning. Prejudice dressed as love, ambition masquerading as duty, a crime so intimate it cut through Hartford's elite like a knife. And decades later, when William returned to Hartford with Bridget and their children, the town finally saw the irony. The family Eleanor tried to destroy had flourished, respected, prosperous, unbroken. The Hartford current captured it best. The union, nearly ended by poison, has instead blossomed into one of New England's most respected families, proving that love and character endure when hatred rots away. This case is more than history. It is a mirror. It asks, when fear festers into obsession, how far will someone go? Could it happen again today? Tell us in the comments. Do you believe prejudice can still drive someone to murder in the name of family honor? If you want more tales where love, hate, and horror intertwine in America's dark past, subscribe, ring the bell, and share this story with someone who dares to look into history's shadows.